The man at the fire escape window shouldn't have been able to reach the fourth floor. Mira Chen pressed her back against the kitchen counter, phone clutched in her hands that suddenly felt too weak to dial 911. The stranger stood perfectly still on the metal grating outside, silver gray eyes fixed on her through the glass. Rain streamed down his black hair and soaked his expensive suit, but he didn't shiver, didn't blink. "I know what your grandmother told you this morning," he said, his voice carried clearly through the closed window. "That you are Duan Jen, the broken root, that the Chen family line ends with you." Mira's breath caught. Those exact words. Wei Chen had used those exact words just 12 hours ago, standing in her pristine kitchen in Pacific Heights, pronouncing judgment like a death sentence. "Who are you?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Lord Kieran Ashwood." He tilted his head slightly, water running off his sharp, aristocratic features. "And I've come to offer you something your family cannot. A purpose beyond fertility. A belonging that doesn't require you to break yourself trying to be whole." The impossible thing was that he knew about the 3 miscarriages the doctors couldn't explain, about the shame that followed her through every family gathering, about the ritual her mother had performed last year, the one that left the faint scar on Mira's left wrist and accomplished nothing except confirming what everyone already believed. She was barren, worthless, the end of 5 generations. "How do you know about my grandmother?" Mira moved toward the window despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "About what she said? I know many things." His silver eyes caught the streetlight, reflecting it back like an animal's. "I know you're a data analyst at Chen Technologies. I know you take the same route home every Tuesday. I know you stopped attending family dinners 3 months ago because you couldn't bear their pity disguised as concern." Mira's hand tightened on her phone. "You're stalking me. I'm choosing you." He placed one pale hand against the glass. No condensation formed from his breath. "There's a difference." "For what?" "Companionship, partnership, a life that extends beyond the narrow definitions your family has imposed." His expression shifted, something ancient moving behind those strange eyes. "I am offering you eternity, Mira Chen, but first you must invite me inside." The rational part of her brain cataloged the warning signs. Strange man, knows too much, physically impossible position outside her window, talking about eternity like it's a real thing people can offer. But the broken part, the part that had spent 29 years trying to be enough and failing, that part whispered something different. What if he's telling the truth? "Why me?" she asked. "If you can offer eternity, why choose someone who can't even—" Her throat closed around the word, couldn't even say it out loud. "Because immortality requires sacrifice." Kieran's voice softened. "And you've already paid the price. You know what it means to lose the future everyone expected of you. To watch time take away what you thought defined your worth." Faint marks appeared along his neck, luminescent lines that pulsed with something that wasn't quite light. Mira's breath stopped. "What are you?" "Something very old. Something that has watched empires rise and fall, watched everyone I've ever cared for age and die." His hand remained pressed against the glass. "I am tired of being alone, Mira, and you are tired of being broken. Perhaps we can solve each other's problems." Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, her friend and the fertility specialist who delivered the final verdict 6 months ago. "Checking in. You okay? Haven't heard from you since your grandmother's visit." Mira stared at the message, then at the impossible man at her window. "If I invite you in," she said slowly, "what happens?" Kieran smiled. It didn't reach his ancient eyes. "Everything changes, or nothing does. The choice, Miss Chen, is entirely yours." The rain fell harder. The luminescent marks on his neck pulsed brighter. And Mira Chen, 29 years old and certain she had nothing left to lose, reached for the window lock. Mira's hand rested on the window lock. Her fingers had gone numb from gripping it so tightly. "You're waiting for an invitation," she said, "like the old stories." Kieran tilted his head. Rain dripped from his black hair onto his shoulders. "Some stories survive because they contain truth." "So you're a vampire." "I am many things. That word carries centuries of misunderstanding." He shifted his weight on the fire escape. The metal didn't creak under him. But yes, in the way you mean it. I require blood to sustain myself. I do not age. Sunlight causes me pain, but not death, and I cannot enter a home uninvited. The calm way he said it made Mira's stomach drop. She should slam the window shut. Call the police. Run. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Why me?" "Because you are what I have searched for." Kieran's silver gray eyes caught the kitchen light. "For 300 years, I have looked for someone whose body would not betray them. Someone whose supposed flaw is actually a gift. Infertility is not a gift. It is when the alternative is watching your children grow old and die while you remain unchanged." His voice went soft. "When the alternative is bearing generation after generation until you forget which great-great-grandchild's funeral you're attending." Mira's breath caught. She had never considered that perspective. "Every companion I have chosen eventually breaks," Kieran continued. "They beg for the gift of mortality. They watch their siblings have grandchildren while they remain frozen at 30. The human need to create new life becomes unbearable." He leaned closer to the glass. "But you have already mourned that loss. You have already been called broken. What your family sees as your greatest shame, I see as your greatest strength." The words hit like a physical blow. Mira's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Broken root, dead branch, failed daughter. You want me because I can't have children. I want you because you are free from the biological imperative that destroys every other companion I have chosen." Kieran's expression held something like loneliness. "I am offering you what you have craved since your first miscarriage, to be chosen for what you are, not despite it." Mira's hand trembled on the lock. "This is insane." "Yes, you're asking me to become a vampire. I am asking you to consider it. The transformation takes preparation, weeks of planning. Tonight, I simply ask that you listen to my full offer." He gestured to the warm apartment behind her. "I have been standing in the rain for an hour. May I come inside and speak with you properly?" Every rational instinct screamed no, but Mira thought of her grandmother's face that morning. The disgust, the finality. "You end our family line." She thought of the empty nursery she'd painted 3 times, the baby clothes she'd donated, the pitying looks from Dr. Sarah Okonkwo when the third pregnancy ended in blood and grief. She thought of the hollow ache that lived in her chest where hope used to be. "If I invite you in," Mira said slowly, "can I uninvite you? Can I change my mind?" "No," Kieran's honesty was brutal. "Once invited, I can enter whenever I wish. That is why I have waited for you to choose. This decision is irreversible." "But I don't know anything about you." "Then let me tell you." He held out one pale hand. "I am 847 years old. I was born in England when it was still called Mercia. I have been a knight, a lord, a merchant, and a monster. I am offering you eternity, purpose, and freedom from the expectations that have crushed you." His silver eyes held hers. "I am offering you a place where being unable to bear children is not a flaw. It is a prerequisite." Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. This was impossible. Insane. Everything she'd been taught said to refuse, but everything she'd been taught had also told her she was worthless. She turned the lock. The window slid open with a soft scrape. "Come in," she whispered. Kieran stepped over the threshold in one fluid motion. The temperature in the kitchen dropped 10 degrees. He was taller than she'd realized, at least 6 inches above her own 5'4" frame. Up close, she could see the inhuman stillness in him. His chest didn't rise and fall with breath. "Thank you." He shook rain from his black hair like a cat. "I promise you will not regret this." Mira closed the window with shaking hands. "I already regret it." "Good." Kieran's smile showed a hint of sharp canines. "Doubt means you're still thinking clearly." He glanced around her small kitchen, taking in the half-empty tea mug, the unopened mail, the calendar with 3 months of dates crossed out in red. "Shall we sit? This conversation will take some time." Mira pulled out a chair at her small table. Her legs felt weak. She had just invited a vampire into her home. And the terrifying part was the small voice in her head that whispered, "Finally, someone who wants me exactly as I am. Mira stood at the window that night. She stood there for 10 minutes after Kieran finally left, her hand still on the latch. The rain stopped. The fire escape was empty. She could almost believe she'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. She called Dr. Sarah Okonkwo the next morning. "I need you to tell me I'm not crazy," Mira said, pacing her kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. Sarah's voice was warm and steady, the same tone she'd used through 3 miscarriages. "What happened?" "A man showed up at my window last night, 4th floor. He knew things about me, about what Popo said." Mira stopped at the window. The fire escape looked ordinary in daylight. "He said he's a vampire." Silence on the other end. Then, "Did he hurt you?" "No, he wants to. He made an offer." Mira closed her eyes. "I know how this sounds." "It sounds like you need to file a police report," Sarah said, "and maybe stay with me for a few days." But Mira couldn't shake the feeling that calling the police would be pointless. What would she tell them? That a man who might be immortal had climbed her fire escape and offered her eternity? She spent the day trying to work. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, a translation project half finished. But her mind kept circling back to silver gray eyes and the rain dripping from black hair. At sunset, she heard the tap on the window. Her heart jumped. She turned slowly. Kieran stood on the fire escape again. This time he wore a dark gray suit, perfectly dry. He held a leather portfolio under one arm. Mira crossed to the window. She didn't open it, but she didn't walk away either. He gestured to the portfolio, then pointed down. He wanted her to come outside, to meet him at street level. Safer than inviting him in, she thought. Public. Witnesses. She grabbed her jacket. The coffee shop on the corner was bright and crowded. Mira sat across from Kieran at a small table by the window. Around them, people typed on laptops and laughed with friends. Everything felt aggressively normal. Kieran placed the portfolio on the table between them. "You need proof." "Yes." Mira wrapped her hands around her untouched latte. The warmth helped steady her. He opened the portfolio. Inside were photographs, protected by clear sleeves. The first showed a man in Victorian-era clothing standing in front of a building. The man had silver gray eyes and black hair. "San Francisco, 1887, Kieran said. "That building is 3 blocks from here. It burned in the earthquake." Mira studied the photograph. The man looked exactly like Kieran. Not similar, identical. "Could be your great-grandfather," she said. He turned to the next page. A soldier in World War I uniform. Same face, same eyes. Then a photograph from the 1950s. A man at a jazz club. Same face. "These could be faked," Mira said, but her voice shook. "Look at the background details," Kieran said quietly. "The buildings, the cars, the clothing on other people. These aren't digital edits." She looked. The photographs had the texture and quality of their eras. The backgrounds showed streets and storefronts that matched old San Francisco. "The 1906 earthquake started at 5:12 in the morning," Kieran said. "I was on Market Street. The ground moved like ocean waves. I watched the Palace Hotel burn for 3 days." His eyes were distant. The smoke turned the sky orange. Mira's hands tightened on her cup. Anyone could research that. "The smell of burning redwood is different from other woods. Sweeter, almost like incense." He met her gaze. "There was a Chinese woman trapped in a collapsed building on Sacramento Street. I pulled her out. Her name was Lynn. She had a jade bracelet with a dragon carved into it." The detail was too specific, too personal. "The mirrors," Mira said suddenly. "Vampires don't have reflections." Mira looked at the photographs again. The same face across more than a century. Evidence of the impossible. "I need time," she said. "Of course." Kieran closed the portfolio. "But Mira, time is the one thing that changes meaning when you have enough of it." He stood, leaving the portfolio on the table. "Keep them," he said. "Study them, verify them. I'll return tomorrow night." He walked out of the coffee shop. Mira watched him go, then looked at the window again. Her reflection stared back, alone at the table. The portfolio sat in front of her like a door she couldn't close. Mira stood outside the Chen family restaurant, staring at the red lanterns swaying in the afternoon breeze. The photographs were still in her bag. The impossible photographs that showed Kieran's face across 70 years of history. She had come here hoping her family would give her a reason to stay human. The bell chimed as she pushed open the door. The familiar smell of ginger and garlic wrapped around her like a memory. Her mother looked up from the register, and something cold passed across her face before she managed a thin smile. Mira, we didn't expect you. It's Sunday dinner, Mira said. I always come on Sundays. Her mother's fingers tapped the counter. Yes, well, your sister is in the back with Wei Chen. Mira walked through the empty dining room. They always closed Sunday afternoons for family meals. The private room in the back held a large round table where 3 generations had gathered every week for as long as she could remember. Her sister Jade sat beside their grandmother, one hand resting on her belly. The gesture made Mira's stomach twist. Mira! Jade's smile was genuine at least. I'm so glad you came. I have news. Wei Chen didn't look up from her tea. Her silence filled the room like smoke. Mira sat in her usual chair, the one farthest from her grandmother. What news? I'm pregnant again. Jade's joy was so bright it hurt to look at. 3 months along. The doctor says everything looks perfect this time. That's wonderful, Mira's voice came out steady. She had practiced this response after Jade's first pregnancy, and her second. Congratulations. 3 grandchildren, their mother said, entering with a tray of dishes. The family line continues strong. The words hung in the air like a blade. Jade reached across the table to touch Mira's hand. How are you? Sarah told me you've been going through a hard time. I'm fine. Mira pulled her hand back gently. Just busy with work. Still doing translation work? Her mother set down a plate of dumplings with more force than necessary. You should think about finding something with better prospects. Since you won't be needing maternity leave. The dumpling Mira had picked up fell from her chopsticks. Mom, Jade said quietly, that's not what. I'm being practical. Their mother sat down, her face set in hard lines. Mira needs to plan for a different kind of future. One where she takes care of herself, since there won't be children to care for her when she's old. Wei Chen finally spoke. A woman without children is a tree without roots. She takes from the family soil but gives nothing back. Mira's throat felt tight. She had known coming here was a mistake, but some desperate part of her had hoped that maybe, just this once, they would see her as more than her empty womb. I should go, she said, standing. Wait! Jade stood too, her hand still protective over her belly. Stay, please, I want you here. Why? The word came out sharper than Mira intended. So you can share your joy while grandmother explains how I'm a broken branch on the family tree? That's not fair, their mother said. We're not trying to hurt you. We're being honest. You need to accept reality. I have accepted reality. Mira grabbed her own bag. The photographs inside seemed to burn through the fabric. I've accepted that I don't belong here anymore. Mira, Jade started, but Wei Chen cut her off. Perhaps it's better if you don't come to family dinners anymore. Your presence brings sadness to what should be celebrations. Every time we gather to honor new life, you remind us of failure. The words hit like physical blows. Mira had expected them, had braced for them, but they still knocked the air from her lungs. You're right, she said quietly. I shouldn't be here. She walked out through the empty dining room, past the photos on the wall showing 4 generations of Chen women, all holding babies, all except her. The bell chimed behind her as she stepped into the street. The red lanterns swayed overhead, celebrating a family line she would never continue. Mira pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she typed the message to the number Kieran had given her. I want to hear more about your offer. When can we meet? The response came within seconds. Tonight, I'll come to your apartment at sunset. Mira looked back at the restaurant one last time. Through the window, she could see Jade laughing, her mother smiling, Wei Chen nodding with satisfaction. A complete family, with no space left for broken branches. She turned away and walked toward the subway, toward her empty apartment, toward a decision that felt more inevitable with every step. If her family had no use for a woman who couldn't bear children, perhaps eternity did. Mira's hand still shook as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. The taste of her family's rejection sat bitter on her tongue. She wanted to cry, But the tears wouldn't come. Instead, there was only numbness spreading through her chest like winter frost. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The offer still stands. Come to Ashwood Manor if you wish to talk. K, an address followed. A location on the outskirts of the city where old estates still stood among the sprawl. Myra stared at the message. Every rational thought screamed that this was madness. Vampires weren't real. Immortality was impossible. Going to a stranger's home alone at night was dangerous. But her grandmother's words echoed louder. A tree without roots. She called a rideshare. Ashwood Manor rose from manicured grounds like something from another century. Stone walls climbed 3 stories high. Narrow windows glowed with warm light against the darkness. Iron gates stood open, as if expecting her. The driver gave her a concerned look. You sure about this, miss? I'm sure, Mira lied. She walked the gravel path to the front door. It opened before she could knock. Lyra stood in the entrance, a woman perhaps 40 years old with steel-gray hair pulled back severely. She wore a simple black dress that somehow looked more elegant than any fashion Mira had seen. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over Mira once. Miss Chen, Lord Ashwood is expecting you. Her accent carried notes of somewhere distant and old. This way. The interior took Mira's breath. Dark wood paneling gleamed in lamplight. Paintings that looked genuinely ancient lined the walls. The air smelled of old books and something else. Something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Lyra led her through corridors that seemed to stretch impossibly long. Finally, she stopped before a heavy oak door. He's inside. I'll bring tea. Lyra's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, he doesn't extend this offer lightly. Then she was gone, footsteps fading into silence. Mira pushed open the door. The library beyond was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of books. A fireplace crackled with real flames. Kieran stood by the window, his silver-gray eyes reflecting the fire's light. He wore dark trousers and a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The luminescent marks along his neck were barely visible in the dim light. You came, he said softly. I wasn't certain you would. My family made it clear I don't belong with them. Mira's voice came out steadier than she felt. But before I make any decision, I need the whole truth. Not just the romantic parts about eternity and purpose. Kieran's jaw tightened. You want to know the cost. I want to know everything. He gestured to 2 leather chairs near the fire. Mira sat, feeling the old leather creak beneath her. Kieran remained standing and his back to her, staring into the flames. I told you I searched 300 years for someone like you, he began. I didn't tell you why I started searching. The fire popped. Sparks drifted up the chimney. 400 years ago, I fell in love. Her name was Catherine. She was brilliant, fierce, everything I'd been searching for. His hands clenched at his sides. I offered her immortality. She accepted. I transformed her. Mira waited. The silence stretched thin. What I didn't know, Kieran continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, was that Catherine was pregnant when I turned her. Cold understanding washed through Mira's chest. The transformation should have ended the pregnancy. Human biology can't sustain life alongside vampiric change. But somehow the child survived. Kieran turned to face her. His eyes held centuries of pain. He was born 6 months later. A dhampir, half human, half vampire. Neither one nor the other. What happened to him? Mira asked, though part of her didn't want to know. For the first years, he seemed normal. Stronger than human children, but normal enough. Catherine loved him desperately. I tried to love him too. Kieran's voice cracked. But as he grew, the dual nature began to tear him apart. The vampire hunger warred with human conscience. The need for blood fought against the capacity for empathy. He became something monstrous. The fire's warmth couldn't touch the chill spreading through Mira's body. By his 20th year, he'd killed 17 people. Catherine couldn't see it. She made excuses, blamed circumstances, anything but accept what he'd become. Kieran's hands trembled. I had to stop him. I had to protect the innocent. So I did what no father should ever have to do. You killed your own son, Mira whispered. I destroyed a monster I had created through my own ignorance. Kieran met her eyes. Catherine never forgave me. She walked into sunlight 3 days later. Lyra entered silently, setting a tea tray on the small table between the chairs. She touched Kieran's shoulder briefly before leaving. That's why you need someone who can't have children, Mira said. Understanding clicked into place like a lock. Not just to spare them the pain of watching families age, but to prevent another dhampir. Yes, Kieran finally sat, his movements heavy with exhaustion that had nothing to do with the body. I will never risk creating another one. Never. So I searched for someone who could share eternity without that possibility. Someone whose inability to conceive isn't a flaw, but a necessary truth. Mira's hands wrapped around the warm teacup. The heat felt real, solid, anchoring her to this impossible moment. You're not just offering me escape, she said slowly. You need me specifically because of what my family calls broken. Yes, the fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. What else haven't you told me? Kieran's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. You're the first person in 3 centuries to ask that question. Kieran turned from the fireplace, his silver gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The transformation takes 3 nights, he said. The first night you drink from me. My blood will begin changing yours, cell by cell. It feels like fire in your veins. Mira's hands gripped the leather armrests. How much fire? Enough that you'll wish for death. He didn't soften it. The second night is worse. Your body fights the change. Every nerve will scream. You'll see visions, memories that aren't yours, faces of people long dead. The fire crackled in the silence. Mira thought of her grandmother's face at the dinner table, cold with judgment. She thought of her mother's disappointed face. The pain couldn't be worse than that slow death of belonging nowhere. And the third night, Kieran moved closer, his footsteps silent on the Persian rug. The third night you die, your heart stops, your lungs still. For 7 minutes, you are gone completely. But I come back. If your body accepts the change, yes. He knelt before her chair, bringing his face level with hers. But not everyone does. 1 in 20 doesn't wake. Their bodies reject the transformation, and they simply end. The faint scar on her left wrist tingled. Her grandmother had cut her there during a family ritual when she was 12, binding her to the Chen bloodline. That bloodline had rejected her anyway. What are the odds I'm that 1 in 20? Mira asked. I don't know. Kieran's honesty cut deeper than comfort would have. I've transformed 4 people in 800 years. All 4 survived, but I chose carefully. I choose you carefully now. Mira studied his face, the sharp cheekbones, the pale skin that held no warmth from the fire behind him. Why me, really? Not the answer about infertility, the real reason. Something flickered in those silver gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Because you're already halfway dead, he said quietly. I saw it the moment I looked through your window. A woman going through the motions of living while her family drained her dry. You're strong enough to survive the transformation because you've already survived something worse. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in years. If I do this, Mira said, I can never go back. Never see my family grow old. Never. Never be judged by them again, Kieran finished. Never hear your worth measured in children you couldn't have. Never watch your sister's pity or your grandmother's disgust. Mira closed her eyes. She saw the Sunday dinner table, empty chair after empty chair, as years passed and she remained frozen. She saw her grandmother's funeral, her mother's, her sister's. She saw herself standing at gravesides, eternally young while everyone who had called her broken turned to dust. The image should have terrified her. It didn't. I want to start tonight, she said. Kieran's expression didn't change, but the luminescent marks along his neck began to glow faintly. Are you certain? Once we begin, there's no stopping. You either complete the transformation or die trying. I'm certain. He stood, offering his hand. His skin was cool against her palm as he pulled her to her feet. Then we go to the transformation chamber. It's warded, protected. No one will disturb us for 3 nights. Mira followed him from the library, her legs steady despite the fear coursing through her. They climbed a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open at Kieran's touch. The stairs spiraled upward into darkness. At the bottom, a heavy wooden door stood closed. Kieran paused with his hand on the iron handle. "Last chance," he said. "Walk away now, and I'll have Lyra drive you home. You'll never see me again." Mira thought of her apartment, empty and silent. She thought of her phone, full of messages from Dr. Sarah Okonkwo asking if she was okay. She thought of the life she was about to leave behind, a life that had never truly wanted her anyway. "Open the door," she said. The chamber beyond was circular, lit by dozens of candles. A bed stood in the center, draped in dark velvet. The walls were carved with symbols she didn't recognize, ancient and strange. Kieran led her to the bed. She sat on the edge, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Lie back," he said gently. "Try to relax." Mira obeyed, her body sinking into the soft bedding. Kieran sat beside her, rolling up his sleeve to expose his wrist. The luminescent marks on his neck glowed brighter now, pulsing with an otherworldly light. "When you drink," he said, "don't stop until I tell you. No matter how it tastes, no matter what you feel. Do you understand?" Mira nodded, her throat too tight for words. Kieran raised his wrist to his mouth. His teeth, suddenly sharp, suddenly inhuman, pierced his own skin. Dark blood welled up, almost black in the candlelight. He held his wrist to her lips. "Drink," he commanded. Mira drank. The first taste was copper and ice. Then came the fire. The transformation took 3 nights, just as Kieran had promised. Mira woke on the fourth dawn in a bedroom she didn't recognize. Silk sheets whispered against her skin. Every thread felt distinct, separate. The room smelled of old wood and lemon oil, and something metallic she couldn't name. She sat up. Her body moved differently now, faster, smoother, like a knife cutting through water. Lyra stood by the window, her back to the room. "How do you feel?" Mira opened her mouth, closed it. How could she explain that she felt everything? The air moving across her skin, the individual fibers in the carpet, the pulse of blood in Lyra's throat, steady and warm and hungry, Mira whispered. "That's normal." Lyra turned, holding a crystal glass filled with dark liquid. "This will help, for now." Mira took the glass. The blood was cold, preserved somehow. It tasted like metal and salt and something bitter underneath. Her body absorbed it instantly, the hunger fading to a low hum. "Lord Ashwood is waiting on the roof," Lyra said. "When you're ready." Mira found clothes laid out on a chair, simple black pants and a soft gray sweater. Not hers. She dressed slowly, testing this new body. Everything felt sharper, more precise, like she'd been living underwater her whole life and had finally surfaced. The stairs to the roof wound through the old mansion. Mira climbed them without effort, without breath. She didn't need to breathe anymore. The realization should have terrified her. It didn't. Kieran stood at the roof's edge, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. San Francisco spread below them, a carpet of lights beginning to fade as morning approached. "The sun will rise soon," he said without turning. "You'll need to go inside before then. In a few decades, you'll be able to tolerate brief exposure. But not yet." Mira joined him at the edge. The city looked different now. She could see individual windows and buildings miles away, could hear traffic on the bridge, voices in the streets below. "Do you regret it?" Kieran asked. She considered the question. 3 nights of agony. Her heart stopping, restarting, stopping again. Visions of everyone she'd ever known aging and dying while she remained frozen. The final terrible moment when her heart stopped for the last time. "No," she said. Kieran finally looked at her. His silver gray eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Relief, perhaps, or recognition. "Your family will wonder where you are," he said carefully, "if you want to contact them." "I don't." The words came out harder than she'd intended. Mira softened her voice. "They made their choice. They told me I was broken, that I took from them but gave nothing back." She looked down at her hands. The same hands but different now, stronger, eternal. They were right in a way, Mira continued. I was taking their judgment, their pity, their disappointment, carrying it like it was mine to bear. And now I'm choosing something else. She met Kieran's gaze. Someone chose me not because of what I could give them, not despite what I lacked. You chose me because of who I am. Kieran moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his body. The same cold that now lived in her own skin. I searched 300 years for you, he said quietly. I won't pretend this will be easy. Immortality is beautiful and terrible. You'll watch the world change. Watch everyone you knew grow old. Except you. Except me. The sky was lightning now, pink and gold bleeding across the horizon. Mira felt the approaching sun like pressure against her skin. Not painful yet, but warning. We should go inside, Kieran said. But Mira didn't move. She stood at the edge of the roof, watching dawn come to a city she'd lived in her whole mortal life. A city that looked entirely new now. I used to think I was broken, she said. That something essential was missing from me. My grandmother said I was a dead branch on the family tree. She turned to Kieran. But you saw something else. You saw someone strong enough to survive this, strong enough to choose a different kind of life. I did, Kieran said. I do. The sun touched the edge of the bay. Light spilled across the water, moving toward them. Mira took Kieran's hand. His skin was cold, like hers now, like they were made of the same material, carved from the same stone. Then let's go inside, she said. We have eternity to watch the sunrise. But today, I want to learn what comes next. Kieran's fingers tightened around hers. Everything, he said simply. Everything comes next. They walked together toward the stairs, leaving the rising sun behind. Mira didn't look back at the city, at her old life, at the family who had rejected her. She had been chosen, finally, completely, intentionally chosen, and she had chosen in return. The door closed behind them as the first rays of sunlight touched the empty rooftop. Inside, in the cool darkness of Ashwood Manor, Mira Chen began her first day of forever.